Hello, in this video we will be showing how to modify MO71 so that you can look at your MQ definitions from a browser. We saw in the introduction video how easy it is to define queue manager locations, and we will take that as our starting point for this demonstration. If we start a browser now, we will see that the browser cannot connect to the administration panel. You can see that we are trying to connect to the main administration page over port 8080. So let's now make MO71 respond to browsers. The first thing to do is go to the Preference dialog and the HTTP tab. You can see that we have a number of options we can specify, and one of the key fields is the root path of the HTML files used for web access. This should point to the HTML directory you unzipped from the install zip file. The HTML files can be tailored, as we'll see later, but for now we'll just use the default files that were supplied with MO71. Next, we need to set the port number. Your system may well already have something listening on port 80, so we'll change the port number to say 8080. We then start the listener and you can see that MO71 tells you that it's started. If we now refresh the browser, you'll see that MO71 serves up the default pages. However, although we now have a page, we don't have any queue managers in the list. The reason for this is that you need to tell MO71 which queue managers should be available from the browser. We do this by making a quick change in the location dialog. By selecting the HTTP allowed and refreshing the browser, we can see that we now have queue manager north returned in the page. By clicking on the queue manager name itself, MO71 will display the queue manager definition and status in the right-hand frame. Of course, the key thing to realize is that this has all been done without any of the complexity of an HTTP server. MO71 is capable of serving up any file, so you can add your own HTML pages, JavaScript or images. To the left of the queue manager there is a twisty. If we click on that, you see you're presented with a selection of links. For example, clicking on channels will show us the defined channels. If we click on one of these channels, we can see the channel definition, and we can scroll through the definition and look at all of its attributes. So you can see that you now have access to all of your MQ object and status data. All you need to do is decide which of your queue managers you wish to be visible from browsers. For example, we can now add the South queue manager. And the South queue manager is now added to the list of queue managers. And of course, in a similar fashion, we can go ahead and add all of our queue managers to the list. The next thing I would like to show is the list of queues. You can see that along with the queue definitions, the page also has a few buttons at the top of the page. When we click on these buttons, we see that it changes the list of queues displayed. It is worth spending a few moments to understand how this works. To do this, we take a look at the HTML files we mentioned earlier. In the HTML root directory, there are a number of files which are used by MO71 as templates which describe what should be sent to the browser depending on the URL. For example, you can have a different HTML file for each of the MQ object types. The default files supply a queues HTML file to show you how this is done, but you could just as easily do it for channels. So, if we take a look at the content of the queues HTML file, you can see that the buttons are nothing more than hyperlinks containing the queue URL. What makes the buttons work is that the URL contains a filter element which controls what is displayed. You can specify any filter, which makes this a powerful mechanism, and clearly adding your own buttons to do your own filtering would be easy. We've seen that you can click on the object link to see the object attributes. In the case of the queues though, we also have a browse icon which allows us to look at the messages on the queue. Here we have a selection of various types of message. By clicking on one of the messages, we can look at the contents of the message. This display also shows previous and next buttons which allow us to traverse through the queue. The next thing I would like to demonstrate is how you can display results from multiple queue managers. In this URL, we see that the filter contains the function QM. This allows us to tell MO71 which queue managers we are interested in. If we refresh the browser, we see that MO71 now returns results from all the queue managers. The filter also told MO71 to sort the output by descending queue depth. By the use of filters, you can easily see just the part of the MQ real estate you are interested in. As I mentioned before, you can also change the look and feel of the browser pages themselves and tailor them to your own installation. To demonstrate this, let's assume that we have a gemstone mining company. We have put the HTML files we want MO71 to use in a different directory, so we change the root HTML path in the preference dialog. If we press refresh on the browser now, we can see that the pages look very different. These pages show that you can very simply add your own graphics, logos, links. You can also integrate MQ displays with other web pages that you may have in your organization. We also see demonstrated on this page two separate sets of queue managers, one for production and one for development. This is achieved by having two QM list statements in the HTML file. Of course, one of the principal advantages of displaying the MQ data in a browser is that now you can display MQ information on a huge range of devices, such as your mobile phone or your tablet. Being able to make a quick check on the status of your MQ installation, for example checking queue depth or the status of your channels, can be very quick and painless. Only if you see a problem would you actually need to log onto a computer to go and fix the issue. Another ability that some customers have found useful is to be able to display their MQ status on a simple smart TV. It is easy to change the HTML to make the browser refresh the page on a regular basis. So now we have a quick and easy way of providing a status display for your department to show them what is currently happening in the MQ network. In this display we can see that the filter is colouring the line red if the depth of the queue is too large. By adding frames, you could display multiple results, or by adding some JavaScript, you could make the display as dynamic as you like. I hope you found that a useful brief introduction to web access in MO71. The manual contains much more information about the options that are available to you. Thank you for watching.